Hi guys, welcome to Real Street TV. My name is Marcus Lee, joined by Liz Mytton and CJ Lee. And in this video, we are talking about the concept of quantity versus quality. Something you may have heard of before, but we are discussing it because it's something that's really important to discuss. I've even done a previous vlog on the Real Street TV YouTube channel, so please check that out. But it's the idea of, is it good to work on a masterpiece, quality, or just to keep creating in the hope that eventually someone will see what you do? I think of it in the terms of someone who's recording albums. Do you spend 5 years working on a masterpiece and put the album out there? Or do you just get busy and keep writing songs, putting out EPs with the hope that someone will recognise your work and sign you up for a multi-million-pound record deal? So that's where I'm coming from in terms of quantity versus quality. So CJ, what's your thoughts about quantity versus quality?
I'm a quantity leads to mastery guy. So I believe, if I take it, look, I don't write music, I don't write songs. I'm not suggesting that you should put out crap music or crap content, but I just believe that you learn from your mistakes. The more you do something, the more skillful you become, the more you start to master your craft. And eventually, by doing enough of those things and learning from your mistakes, you will reach mastery along the way. So, yeah, I'm a real kind of, do stuff, get content out there, get feedback, learn from your mistakes, and approach mastery.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think again, nobody wants to put rubbish out. You don't want to be putting. There's a certain film director and producer that me and Marcus talk about sometime, who has done some horrific work and just keeps producing it because they're very, very rich and they can do that and they manage the whole process. As a result of that, they get slated a lot because of the quality of the work, but they don't care. They just think, well, people buy my stuff, people watch my stuff. And I suppose it depends on your motivation for doing something. If you want to have that mastery, if you want people to admire your work, if you want your work to make a real significant cultural difference, then you want it to be excellent. But I think the only way you can do that is by practicing. But I think the only thing that I think is that things don't always have to be put out there. You can be writing lots of work or making lots of work and going through that process. And it's not always going to be for a wide audience. It might get a reading or it might get a few people's eyes on it so they can critique it and give you feedback. Not everything has to be put out online. Obviously, if you're an online content creator, then you are going to put stuff online. But I think you just scale it. You start with what you can manage based on the tools that you've got and you build it from there. It does depend on what you're doing. You have to keep doing something to master it. You're not just going to say, it's very rare that, there are very few prodigies in the world who produce that one golden piece of work. Most people develop by being taught, being mentored, and by practicing and getting feedback and taking that on board and producing more stuff. And sometimes I know there was work that by no means am I an expert in anything, but I know years ago there was stuff that I was writing that I thought was excellent. And when I read it back now, I think, oh, that was horrific. And I let people read that. But, it's just because I'm a bit further on now, I can reflect on that and can see where I've grown. So I think it is important to keep producing stuff. But I think, you can be deserving in who your audience is and whether you want to make something more public or keep it for a smaller audience. Sorry, really long answer there.
That's fine. Going back to that thing about artistry, I think about music. So in the 90s, I had a real love for hip-hop music, rap music. So when I think of two artists that I listen to a lot, I listen to the Notorious B.I.G. and I listen to Jay-Z. So Notorious B.I.G. tragically had his life cut short, only released two albums, but he's considered one of the greatest rappers of all time. I put that alongside Jay-Z, who had a lot of love for Jay-Z at the time, but Jay-Z had this thing where he seemed to release an album every year. So, 12-track album, a 14-track album every year. Now, I would argue that the quality of Jay-Z's output wasn't as good, but it really brought him to the top of the masses in terms of attention. Everyone knew who Jay-Z was, because he's always in your face. So that's where I sort of wonder about the quantity versus quality argument. It's like, yes, I do want to create masterpieces, but for when you need the money and the time to create a masterpiece. And secondly, you know, if you've also got the money to just put stuff out, you can do that. But does just putting stuff out there help you if your goal is to try and generate some sort of audience?
Yeah, only if it's good.
Well, I disagree with that because, look, we can look at the masters across a range of fields, and I know we've picked up this kind of music analogy. You know, even when I listen to an album, and even if it's an album of somebody who's considered a great kind of musician or a great performer, you know, let's say there's 14 tracks on that album, and I might only think 2 or 3 of those songs are masterpieces in terms of music, and honestly, if you've got 3 tracks on an album and 3 of them are masterpieces, you're doing exceptionally well.
Yeah.
The thing is, I might then go and kind of catch up with you, Marcus, or you, Liz, and say, oh, you've got to listen to this album, it's amazing, and you've got to listen out for these 3 tracks, and you come back to me and go, oh my god, those 3 tracks, they sucked, but I really loved track number 2.
Yeah.
And so the thing about kind of mastery and the thing about kind of what we think is exceptional is a very subjective thing. So sometimes when you put out some of the material that you don't consider to be amazing, there's always somebody who thinks, oh my god, I've never heard anything like that before,
Yeah.
or I've never seen anybody do something like that before. And sometimes mastery comes from accidents or mistakes. So if you're not in a position where you're consistently producing things and trying things and practicing, and you know, I think we all agree, practice does make more perfect, it at least makes permanent.
Yeah.
Then you risk, some people risk not putting anything out there because it's not their masterpiece, it's not the thing that they want people to associate them with them.
Yeah.
and their brand and their work. So yeah, it is a difficult one, but even mastery is quite a subjective thing.
Yeah.
Now, I was just thinking though, I mean, maybe we've just gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, but I was thinking when somebody puts music out, they're generally loving their own music, you know, but when you put an album together, people decide which ones are going to be released as singles and which ones are not, because which ones are going to have the big kind of commercial appeal. But I think there's a difference. I mean, they're still putting quality out. There's a difference between that and just knocking work out or knocking substandard films out and not... I don't know, just wanting to have a presence for the sake of having a presence.
Liz, I kind of agree with you. I think, look, social media these days is a really good example of people just posting, like people posting themselves on the toilet, what they're having for breakfast, getting in the car, you know, paying for their bus ticket. I mean, literally, the range of ridiculous content that's out there. It amazes me sometimes. So clearly there are people who have decided, I'm just going to put out loads of stuff and I'm going to see what vibes, or maybe they just don't care. Maybe they just feel like they're not living their life if they're not posting it on social media. So clearly I'm not a big fan of that, but by the same token, those people are probably developing their skills a lot faster than the people who are a lot more kind of careful about what they release and what they put out to the world. Now, I'm not saying that's not supposed to be a blanket kind of truth, because clearly there are some very diligent kind of creators out there, some very diligent athletes, sports people, scientists who are practicing their craft and then making breakthroughs and producing phenomenal work. So there is definitely a balance, but I just feel like there's as many people who don't put out stuff because they don't think it's good enough that really should just put it out there and get some feedback from somebody else, because sometimes when you work on a project, when you put in all of that time and that effort, you become your worst critic, and sometimes you're overly critical, and you just need somebody else who can be really objective about your work.
Yeah. I think I agree with both of you in certain elements of what you said there. I think the idea is to keep going and to keep creating. So quantity is important there. But I think you said it, Liz, not everything has to become public. Not everything has to be put out to the masses. I think it's good to create, but then maybe to have a close circle of friends or people who will be honest with you and give you constructive criticism and tell you, right, that was great, but this is rubbish. And there's more in you than that, or you can do that better. So I think the idea is that quantity can lead to quality. So the more that you do, just like you said, CJ, the more you practice, the more you're honing your craft, the better things can get. But I think if you are just thinking, I'm working on this one thing and it's going to be a masterpiece, but then you don't do anything else and you're not willing to step out or try anything else, then I think you're going to struggle. So I think working consistently at something is really important.